August 3rd, 1943. 2:14 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The factory floor is never quiet. Even at 2 in the morning, Willow Run hums like a living thing. Steel ribs vibrating under the weight of motion, light pouring down from rows of hanging lamps, the air thick with oil, sweat, and the metallic bite of hot rivets. Somewhere overhead, a crane rattles along its rails. Below, a line of half-finished aircraft stretches so far into the distance it disappears into haze. AB 24 Liberator creeps forward on the assembly line. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady, 1 foot every few minutes. That's all it takes. At Station 37, Ruth Thompson, age 24, tightens the final bolts on a wing panel. Her hands move automatically now. 3 months ago, she'd never touched power tools. Tonight, she barely looks down. She's already thinking about the next aircraft behind this one. Because there's always another one. A whistle blows, sharp, quick. No celebration. No pause. The line doesn't stop. The finished bomber rolls forward, its olive-drab skin catching the light as workers peel away like ants from a leaf. Somewhere down the line, a foreman checks his watch. Another one done. Across the Atlantic, American crews are fighting and dying over Italy, Germany, the Atlantic shipping lanes. But here, inside this massive concrete cathedral, there is no gunfire, no shouting, no enemy in sight. Just production. Relentless. Methodical. Unforgiving. The Germans said this couldn't be done. Their intelligence reports called it impossible. Too complex, too many parts, too many skilled hands required. An aircraft like the B-24 was supposed to take months to build, not hours. They were thinking like soldiers. America was thinking like engineers. A young Army Air Forces lieutenant stands on a catwalk above the line, clipboard tucked under his arm. Lieutenant James O'Donnell has been here for 3 weeks now, watching bombers come into existence the same way other men watch sunrises, one after another, impossible to stop. He leans over the railing and counts. 1, 2, 3. Another Liberator nose section slides into place below him, workers swarming it instantly. Rivet guns hammer in rapid bursts, tat, 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 like mechanical heartbeat. O'Donnell shakes his head. Back in training, instructors talked about tactics, formations, bravery. No one talked about this. No one told him the war might be decided in Michigan. Down on the floor, a supervisor shouts over the noise. Keep it moving. Don't baby it. This bird's gotta fly. The men and women don't argue. They don't slow down. They know the numbers posted on the wall. Target. 1 bomber every 63 minutes. They missed it yesterday. That won't happen again. A Liberator reaches the end of the line. Fresh paint. Fresh engines. Brand new machine guns gleaming under factory lights. It looks almost peaceful, like it doesn't know what it's for yet. Outside, on the runway, test pilots wait. Inside, the line keeps crawling forward. No speeches. No flags waving. No applause. Just another bomber sliding into existence. And nobody here says it out loud, but deep down, they all know the truth. Every hour this line keeps moving, the war tips a little further out of the enemy's reach. The shooting hasn't stopped yet. But here, the outcome is already being built. August 3rd, 1943. 9:41 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Morning light filters through the high windows, cutting pale stripes across the factory floor. The line hasn't slowed since midnight. If anything, it's faster now. More hands, more bodies, more noise layered onto the same relentless motion. A chalkboard near the supervisor's station reads, "Yesterday, 18 aircraft. Today, do not miss." Foreman Earl Watkins wipes sweat from his neck with a rag and squints at the numbers. He's been in auto plants since before the Depression. He's seen speed. He's seen efficiency. He's never seen this. A fuselage section rolls past, suspended from an overhead conveyor. Below it, teams snap into action. One checks wiring harnesses, another installs insulation, another seals panels before the next station even finishes its job. No wasted motion. No backtracking. No arguments. This place runs on discipline, not inspiration. Watkins glances at a clipboard listing the part count for a single B-24. Over 450,000 individual components. Engines, control cables, radios, guns, oxygen systems, each one coming from a different supplier, arriving on time, every time like pieces of a massive mechanical puzzle. Miss one shipment, and the whole thing jams. But it doesn't. That's the miracle. Up on the catwalk, Lieutenant O'Donnell watches a delivery crew unload crates stamped with names from across the country. Akron, Toledo, Pittsburgh, Chicago. Rubber, steel, aluminum, glass. America's geography emptied into one building. He flips a page on his clipboard and stops. Jesus, he mutters. The math doesn't work. At least, not the way he was taught. German factories spread aircraft production across dozens of sites, protecting them from bombing but slowing everything down. Skilled craftsmen built planes like watchmakers, carefully, slowly, perfectly. Willow Run doesn't care about perfection. It cares about throughput. A production engineer named Charles Sorensen, Cast Iron Charlie, paces near the line, tie loosened, eyes never stopping. He helped design this place to build cars, not bombers. And yet here it is, spitting out aircraft faster than the Luftwaffe can destroy them. He stops beside Watkins. Station 42 running behind? Sorensen asks. 3 minutes, Watkins replies. Sorensen nods once. Fix it. No yelling. No drama. 3 minutes matters here. Across the floor, Ruth Thompson finishes her shift and steps aside as the next worker slides into her place. She doesn't clock out yet. She watches the bomber she worked on roll away. Somewhere overseas, she knows a crew will climb inside it. She doesn't know their names. They'll never know hers. That's fine. This isn't about glory. A radio crackles near the foreman's desk. News from overseas. Another raid. More losses. More planes needed. Watkins turns the volume down. Line doesn't care, he mutters. Line just keeps moving. And that's when the visiting officers arrive. 2 U.S. Army generals. 1 British liaison. And trailing behind them. Faces tight. Eyes sharp. 3 German prisoners of war, captured Air Force officers brought here for a controlled tour. They stop dead the moment they see the line. One of them whispers in disbelief. Das ist unmöglich. Impossible. O'Donnell watches their faces change. Not anger, not fear, but something worse. Understanding. Because standing here, watching aircraft roll out faster than artillery shells, they realize what their reports never captured. You don't defeat this with bravery. You don't bomb it into submission fast enough. This isn't a factory. It's a weapon. And it doesn't sleep. August 3rd, 1943. 10:27 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The German officers move slowly now. Not because the tour guide tells them to, but because their brains can't keep up with what their eyes are seeing. The scale hits first. The length of the line. The way it disappears in a haze, curves, and somehow keeps going. One of them, Major Carl Weiss, stops walking altogether. How long is this line? He asks in clipped English. The American civilian escort doesn't look proud. He doesn't smirk. He answers like it's weather. Just under a mile, he says. End to end. Weiss nods once, like he's absorbing a punch. They step onto a catwalk overlooking the center span, the loudest, fastest part of the plant. Below them, 3 Liberators are being worked on at once, nose to tail, each at a different stage of birth. Rivet guns chatter nonstop. Cranes swing engines into place with practiced ease. Workers don't look up at the visitors. Nobody slows down. Nobody cares who's watching. That might be the most unsettling part. A second German officer, Captain Ernst Muller, leans over the railing, eyes fixed on a chalkboard at the end of the line. Was bedeutet das? He asks, pointing. The escort answers. That's today's count. And the hourly target. Muller does the math in his head. You can see it on his face, numbers colliding with doctrine. That would mean he stops himself. Starts again. That would mean more bombers in one day than some of our plants produce in a month. No one corrects him. Because he's low. Down below, a B-24's wing is mated to its fuselage in under 10 minutes. 10. Weiss grips the railing harder. In Germany, he says quietly, this requires master fitters. Specialists. Weeks of work. A nearby production engineer overhears and shrugs. We don't wait for masters, he says. We train the line. That sentence lands harder than any insult. They move on. The tour reaches the end of the assembly line, where finished aircraft roll into final inspection. Engines are run up. Control surfaces tested. Radios crackle to life. A test pilot climbs into a cockpit, still smelling of paint. Weiss watches him. Where are these planes sent? He asks. Wherever they're needed, the escort replies. Europe, North Africa, soon France. The German officers exchange glances. They know what that means. Weiss exhales slowly. You cannot stop this, he says, not accusing, not angry. Just stating fact. The escort nods. That's the idea. From the floor below, a siren sounds. Not an alarm, just a signal. Another liberator clears the line. Watkins checks his watch. Still on schedule. The German officers are quiet now. No more questions. No more disbelief. Just calculation. And dread. Because for the first time, they aren't thinking about tactics or pilots or bravery. They're thinking about replacement rates. About how many planes can be shot down versus how many appear behind them. About fighting an enemy who replaces losses faster than you can inflict them. Weiss turns to O'Donnell as the tour ends. In the air, he says softly, we fight men. He gestures back toward the line. Here, you fight time. O'Donnell doesn't reply. Because the major is right. And everyone here knows it. The line keeps moving. August 3rd, 1943. 14:06 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Lunch hour ends without ceremony. A bell rings, not loud, not dramatic, and workers drift back to their stations like water, finding a channel it already knows. No speeches, no pep talks. The line never stopped anyway. It only slowed just enough to swallow sandwiches and coffee. Down at Station 18, Frank Delgado, a former auto worker from Dearborn, steps back into position and grabs his rivet gun. He doesn't need instructions. He doesn't need blueprints. The job has been broken down until it's almost musical. 3 rivets. Pause. Shift left. 3 more. Tat, tat, tat. Frank's job is not to understand the airplane. His job is to keep time. That's the revolution happening here. Quiet, unglamorous, unstoppable. Willow Run doesn't depend on craftsmen who know the whole machine. It depends on thousands of ordinary people who know one motion perfectly. Across the aisle, Mary Kowalski installs wiring bundles. She checks color codes, snaps connectors into place, and sends the section forward before Frank even finishes his last rivet. No waiting. No bottlenecks. Above them, engineers watch the line like surgeons watching a pulse. Stopwatches in hand. Clipboards full of tiny adjustments. A man in a white shirt, Walter Reuther, union representative, walks beside Charles Sorensen, the production chief. They speak quietly but urgently. New hires are still slower on Station 22, Reuther says. Sorensen doesn't look annoyed. Then Station 22 gets simplified, he replies. Not retrained. Simplified. That's the rule. If a task takes skill, it gets redesigned. If it takes judgment, it gets standardized. If it slows the line, it gets broken. Reuther watches a wing section move past. You're building airplanes like cars, he says. Sorensen allows himself a thin smile. No, he says. We're building time like cars. Outside, a summer thunderstorm rolls in, rain drumming against the vast roof. Inside, nothing changes. Electric lights flick on automatically. The line keeps crawling. Frank wipes sweat from his face and glances up at the fuselage sliding away from him. That one's been England, someone says nearby. Frank nods once. Good, he replies. Send it. He doesn't say more. He doesn't need to, because by the time that bomber lands overseas, Frank will have worked on 6 more. On the catwalk, Lieutenant O'Donnell watches a time study being conducted. An engineer stops the line for exactly 40 seconds to replace a tool rack. 40 seconds. The line restarts instantly. O'Donnell writes it down. Back in pilot training, instructors talked about dogfights and formations. Nobody mentioned that 40 seconds could matter this much. Below him, A sign hangs from a steel beam. The line is the weapon. No slogans about patriotism. No talk of sacrifice. Just truth. By mid-afternoon, the plant has already surpassed yesterday's pace. Watkins marks it on the board without smiling. One bomber every 63 minutes. Exactly on target. Across the Atlantic, German flak gunners and fighter pilots are doing their jobs perfectly, shooting down American planes at rates that would cripple any other nation. Any other nation. But here, at Willow Run, loss is just a number that feeds back into the line. Not panic, not despair, just adjustment. As the rain pounds harder on the roof, Frank sets another row of rivets and steps aside for the next man. The airplane moves on, and the war moves with it. August 3rd, 1943. 1948 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant. Observation Gallery, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Evening settles outside the plant, but inside Willow Run, time barely exists. The lights stay bright. The air stays hot. The line keeps moving. From the observation gallery, the German officers watch in silence as another B-24 rolls beneath them, its engines dangling from hoists like heavy fruit ready to be snapped into place. The gallery vibrates faintly with the rhythm of the line. Metal, motion, repetition. Major Carl Weiss checks his pocket watch. He checks it again. Then he looks down at the chalkboard on the factory floor. Count, 19. And it's not even night shift yet. Captain Ernst Muller breaks the silence. How many hours do you operate? He asks. The American escort answers without hesitation. 24. No stoppage. Muller presses. Maintenance happens while the line runs. The escort replies. We rotate sections. Nothing stops the flow. Weiss exhales slowly, like air leaving a punctured tire. In Germany, factories shut down to repair damage. Workers rested. Production paused when something went wrong. Here, nothing pauses. Below them, a night shift crew filters in, fresh faces replacing exhausted ones without slowing the line by a single inch. Jackets come off. Tools change hands mid-motion. Ruth Thompson passes her station to another woman without a word. The next set of hands already knows what to do. Weiss grips the railing. This means, he says quietly, that losses do not matter. The escort doesn't correct him. Because it's true. On the wall, a large map shows bomber routes over Europe, red lines slicing into Germany from multiple directions. Weiss stares at it longer than the Americans expect. In the air, he says, we destroy them. He taps the chalkboard count. Here, you replace them faster than we can shoot. The math is brutal. Luftwaffe pilots fight bravely. Flak batteries fire accurately. Bombers fall in flames over Hamburg, Bremen, Schweinfurt. And yet, back here, the line absorbs it all. Watkins updates the board again. Count, 20. The gallery goes completely silent. Muller closes his eyes for a moment. In our briefings, he says, we believed American industry was inefficient. Too large. Too disorganized. He opens his eyes. We were wrong. Weiss nods. You have turned time into ammunition, he says. Down below, a supervisor calls out. Engine install complete. Move it. Another Liberator slides forward. Engines mounted. Wings locked. Controls tested. A test pilot climbs the ladder, waving casually to the crew as if boarding a bus. Weiss watches him disappear into the cockpit. That man will die, he says flatly. The escort doesn't flinch. Maybe, he replies. Or maybe he won't. He gestures toward the line. But this place doesn't bet on individuals. That sentence lands harder than anything else said all day. The tour ends. The German officers are escorted toward the exit, their boots echoing through a corridor that smells faintly of oil and ozone. Before leaving, Weiss turns back one last time. In Germany, he says quietly, we fight wars with courage. He pauses. You fight them with calendars. Outside, night air rushes in as the doors open. The sound of the factory spills into the darkness like a mechanical tide. Inside, the line keeps crawling. Another bomber moves forward. Another hour ticks away. And somewhere over Europe, the Luftwaffe is about to learn what it means to fight an enemy who never runs out of time. August 4th, 1943. 6:12 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Morning shift begins without fanfare. No sirens. No speeches. Just a quiet handoff between tired night crews and fresh faces still rubbing sleep from their eyes. On a bulletin board near the main entrance, someone has tacked up a newspaper headline from overseas. Heavy bomber losses over Germany. Most workers glance at it. Some stop for a second longer. Then they keep walking. Inside the plant, the line doesn't acknowledge headlines. At Station 52, Frank Delgado is back again, coffee steaming beside his tool rack. He's already on his 4th aircraft this week. He doesn't know where yesterday's bombers went. He doesn't ask. What he does know is the cadence. Tat, tat, tat. Pause. Shift. Across the aisle, a supervisor updates the production ledger. A number is written, circled, and moved to the side. Yesterday's output, 20. No cheers follow. The marker squeaks softly as it's capped. Up on the catwalk, Lieutenant James O'Donnell studies a teletype message just delivered from Washington. It lists losses from a raid over Schweinfurt. Dozens of aircraft gone in a single mission. He feels his stomach tighten. He looks down at the line. Another fuselage section slides forward. The arithmetic is cruel, but it's clean. Losses are inputs now, not shocks, not setbacks. Inputs. O'Donnell folds the message and slips it into his pocket. There's no point posting it. Panic helps no one here. Down below, Ruth Thompson returns for another shift she wasn't scheduled for. She ties her hair back, tightens her gloves, and steps into place. Thought you were off today, someone says. War's not, she replies. It's half slang, half truth. A logistics officer strides past carrying a clipboard thick with shipping manifests. Aluminum deliveries are on time. Engines are queued. Tires stacked. Radios tested. Nothing missing. That's the real miracle. Across the Atlantic, German planners assume attrition will slow American bombing. They believe losses like yesterday's raid must force a pause. Here, the pause never comes. At 6:47, another Liberator reaches final inspection. Engines roar briefly, then cut. Control surfaces twitch. Radios crackle. Approved. It rolls out. Frank watches it pass and exhales. One more, he mutters. Not proud, not bitter, just factual. A plant manager passes by and stops near the board. Any delays? He asks. No, Watkins replies. We absorbed yesterday's shortfall. Ow! Watkins gestures at the line. We made it up before sunrise. The manager nods and walks on. That sentence, we made it up, will be impossible anywhere else. But here, production doesn't recover. It compensates. By mid-morning, Willow Run has already erased the losses reported in the paper. Not emotionally, mathematically. Another number gets written. Today on track. O'Donnell watches workers move in synchronized motion. Thousands of individual lives feeding one unstoppable process. He realizes something unsettling. If this place existed 10 years earlier, wars would have looked very different. And if it had existed 10 years later, no one would have believed it possible. Outside, the sun climbs over Michigan farmland. Birds scatter from the roar of test engines. Inside, the line advances another few feet. Another bomber exists. Somewhere far away. Crews are counting how many planes didn't come back. Here, the answer is already being built. August 4th, 1943. 11:33 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. A low drone passes overhead. Not close, not threatening. Just a training aircraft heading south. A few workers glance up automatically, a reflex left over from air raid drills that never come. At Willow Run, the war never arrives from the sky. It arrives on paper. Inside a small glass-walled office overlooking the floor, Lieutenant James O'Donnell stands with a civilian analyst from Washington, a man whose job is to think like the enemy. Blueprints are spread across the desk, maps, aerial photos, target studies. This, the analyst says, tapping the photo of the factory roof, would be a priority target if Germany could reach it. O'Donnell watches the line below the move. They can't, he says. The analyst nods. And even if they could, this place is designed to survive disruption. He gestures toward the floor. Redundancy everywhere. Multiple suppliers. Parallel stations. If one section slows, the rest compensate. Bomb one wing of the plant and production reroutes around it. Destroy a supplier and another fills the gap. Kill power and generators take over. This factory wasn't built to impress. It was built to endure. Down below, Ruth Thompson and her crew barely notice when a section temporarily pauses. A supervisor reroutes parts. Another team shifts forward. The delay disappears in minutes. Frank Delgado shakes his head. In my old shop, he says that'd shut us down all day. Here, it doesn't even get a mention. Watkins updates a small card pinned to the board. Delay, 6 minutes, resolved. The card comes down immediately. In Germany, factories hide underground, scattered to avoid bombs. Skilled workers are irreplaceable. Machines are unique. Here, nothing is precious except the flow. O'Donnell realizes something that hadn't occurred to him before. You can't shock a system that expects damage. At 12:02, a freight train whistles outside. New shipments roll in. Engines from Ohio, aluminum from Tennessee, rubber from Akron. None of it stops. None of it slows. The enemy's best weapon, disruption, doesn't work here. On the floor, a Liberator reaches final inspection with a minor defect. A panel fit is off by a fraction. The inspector doesn't argue. He tags it. The aircraft moves to a parallel correction station without stopping the line. Another plane slides into its place instantly. O'Donnell exhales slowly. This place doesn't fight attacks. It absorbs them. He looks again at the aerial photo. A single factory, one roof, one location, and yet it behaves like an entire nation's industry compressed into a mile of concrete. Down below, a foreman shouts, "Keep it tight. We're making the noon target." Workers respond instantly, hands moving faster, smoother. By 11:59, another bomber clears the line. The whistle blows, not a celebration, just a marker. Watkins checks his watch. On time, he says. O'Donnell steps to the window and looks out over the vast roofline, stretching into heat haze. Somewhere over Europe, German planners are trying to calculate how many bombers America can afford to lose. They don't know the answer, because they don't understand the question. This factory isn't meant to survive the war. It's meant to outlast it. August 4th, 1943. 16:27 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The afternoon shift hits its stride. Heat presses down through the massive roof, mixing with the smell of oil and hot metal. Sweat darkens his shirts. Gloves are swapped out. Tools hum without pause. The line doesn't slow. It tightens like a runner settling into pace. At the end of the floor, a large board hangs where everyone can see it. Not propaganda, not slogans, just numbers. Target, 22. Current, 17. 5 to go. Supervisor Earl Watkins stands with his arms crossed, eyes moving from station to station. He doesn't shout. He doesn't hover. He knows the rhythm now. This ain't a sprint, he mutters to no one. It's a drumbeat. At Station 64, a team installs bomb bay doors. Hinges slide into place. Actuators tested. A misalignment flashes red on a gauge. Hold up, someone calls. For 3 seconds, tension spikes. Then a correction team steps in, swaps a bracket, and clears the fault. The fuselage moves on. 6 seconds lost. 6 seconds absorbed. Lieutenant James O'Donnell watches from the catwalk, pencil tapping against his clipboard. He stopped counting individual planes. He's counting flow now. How fast the system recovers, how little disruption matters. That's when it hits him. This factory isn't responding to the war. It's leading it. Across the Atlantic, generals argue over air strategy, daylight raids, escort fighters, bomber streams. All of it depends on one assumption. Losses can be replaced. Willow Run is that assumption made real. Down on the floor, Ruth Thompson tightens a final fitting and steps back, flexing her fingers. "Another one," she says. Frank Delgado grins without looking up. "Told you we'd hit it." Outside, a low rumble rolls across the airfield as engines are tested. Finished Liberators taxi toward the runway in a slow, steady parade. One leaves. Another replaces it. Watkins checks the board again. Current, 18. Someone whistles softly. Not celebration, anticipation. O'Donnell scribbles a note. Output velocity now equals strategic advantage. He underlines it twice. This is the part no battlefield commander ever sees. The part where victory stops being about maneuver and starts being about math. If one side can replace aircraft faster than the other side can destroy them, tactics becomes secondary. Attrition flips direction. At 17:02, a whistle marks another completion. Current, 19. The line doesn't cheer. It doesn't react. It just keeps crawling. A maintenance crew swaps a motor on a conveyor without halting production. A logistics runner reroutes a delayed shipment without anyone noticing. A trainee drops a tool. Another worker hands him a replacement without breaking stride. The system protects itself. O'Donnell feels a strange mix of awe and unease. This isn't human effort anymore. It's momentum. At 18:11, the board changes again. Current, 20. Watkins exhales slowly. Two more, he says. Outside the factory walls, evening shadows stretch across Michigan farmland. Families eat dinner. Radios play swing music. The war feels far away. Inside Willow Run, the war is being decided by minutes. Another bomber rolls forward. Then another. The line closes the gap. Not with heroics. With speed. August 5th, 1943. 1:03 hours. Luftwaffe Intelligence Office, Berlin. The room smells of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. A single desk lamp throws harsh light across stacks of reconnaissance photos and typed reports stamped Geheim. Outside, Berlin sleeps uneasily under blackout curtains. Major Hermann Adler, Luftwaffe Intelligence, rubs his eyes and flips another page. He stops. Das kann nicht stimmen, he mutters. It can't be right. The report claims American heavy bomber output has increased again, despite rising losses. Not gradually, not predictably, exponentially. Adler pulls a photograph from the pile, an aerial image of a massive factory complex in Michigan. Long roof lines, endless windows, rail spurs feeding straight into the building. Willow Run. He compares it to the production estimates beside it. Impossible, he says again, quieter this time. Across the desk, Captain Rolf Becker leans in. How many, he asks. Adler taps the page. One aircraft every hour. Becker lets out a short, humorless laugh. That's propaganda. Adler shakes his head. It matches loss replacement curves. Our pilots are shooting down bombers faster than ever, and the formations keep getting larger. Becker exhales slowly. They're not building planes, he says. They're printing them. In Germany, factories are scattered, bombed, repaired, bombed again. Skilled workers are dead, drafted, or hiding underground. Production schedules slip. Parts go missing. Delays compound. Adler looks back at the photograph. This place hasn't been bombed once, and it doesn't need to be hidden. He scribbles a note in the margin. Enemy industrial concentration equals strategic vulnerability. Then he hesitates. Even if Germany could reach Michigan, what would one raid do? Adler imagines bombs tearing holes in the roof. Fires. Smoke. Then he imagines the line rerouting. Stations shifting. Output dipping briefly, then recovering. The thought chills him. He flips to another report. Interrogations of captured American airmen. They say new aircraft arrive constantly. Becker reads aloud. No shortages. No waiting. Adler closes the folder. We misjudged them, he says. Not their pilots. Not their courage. Their clocks. Back in Michigan, the night shift is already at work. August 5th, 1943. 1:47 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The factory glows against the darkness like a grounded city. Inside, the night crew moves with practiced calm. The heat is lower now. The noise feels steadier, less frantic, like a machine that has found its perfect speed. Frank Delgado works beside a man he's never met before. New hire, second shift. First week, Frank asks. Third day, the man replies. Frank nods. You'll get it. They don't talk again. They don't need to. At the board, Watkins updates the count. Current, 21. One more. Ruth Thompson tightens her last fastener and steps aside. That's it, she says quietly. A Liberator clears final inspection and rolls forward. Engines installed. Controls checked. Approved. The whistle blows. 22. No cheers. Just a few nods. A few glances at the clock. Target met. Watkins writes one final note beneath the number. Standard met. Standard. O'Donnell watches from the catwalk, arms resting on the rail. Across an ocean, enemy officers stare at photographs, trying to understand what they're up against. Here, nobody debates it. They just come in, do the work, hand it off. The line advances another foot. Tomorrow, it will do it again. August 5th, 1943. 7:26 hours. Willow Run Airfield, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Morning fog hangs low over the runway, clinging to the grass and pooling around the wheels of newly finished bombers. One by one, B-24 Liberators sit nose forward, engines idling, propellers slicing the air into shimmering discs. Test pilot Captain Harold Tex Bennett climbs into the cockpit of the lead aircraft, gloves already smudged with oil. He runs his checklist from memory. He's flown dozens of these machines now, each one almost identical, each one brand new. That's the point. Below him, ground crew wave him forward. Bennett eases the throttles up. The Liberator lurches, then gathers speed, rolling through fog that parts like a curtain. The bomber lifts cleanly into the morning sky. Another follows, then another. On the edge of the field, Lieutenant James O'Donnell watches the departures with a strange detachment. These aren't dramatic takeoffs. No crowds, no photographers, just routine. And that's what makes it terrifying. Every aircraft lifting off represents a calculation already settled. Replacement schedules, sortie rates, loss tolerances. Somewhere far away, German planners are adjusting numbers that no longer behave the way they should. Because this factory doesn't surge, it sustains. Back inside the plant, the line is already feeding the next wave. No celebration for hitting yesterday's target. No pause to admire the runway. Watkins walks the floor, checking stations. Same pace today, he says. No heroics. The phrase matters. Heroics burn out. Systems don't. At Station 11, a new hire fumbles a tool. Another worker steps in, corrects the motion, and the line continues uninterrupted. No scolding. No delay. O'Donnell notes it mentally. This place doesn't rely on talent. It relies on replacement. Across the Atlantic, air battles rage. Bomber formations take losses. Crews bail out. Aircraft burn. And yet, the pressure never lets up. By mid-morning, Washington sends another message, requesting output forecast for the next 60 days. Not next week. Not tomorrow. 60 days. Willow Run responds in hours. Numbers go out. Schedules lock in. Commanders plan offensives around them. That's when it becomes clear. The war has already tilted. Not because of a single battle. Not because of a daring raid. But because one side can afford to keep going indefinitely. Outside the factory, Bennett circles back in and lands smoothly. Another Liberator taxis into place behind him. He climbs down, grinning faintly. Fly straight, he tells the crew chief. Send her. No speeches. No ceremonies. Just turn over. O'Donnell looks out across the airfield. Rows of bombers stretching into the distance, each one indistinguishable from the last. He realizes something that hadn't been obvious before. Germany isn't losing because it's being defeated. It's losing because it's being outproduced. And there's no counter to that. The line inside the plant inches forward again. Another fuselage, another wing, another engine. The war doesn't feel closer to ending. But here, the result is already locked in. August 6th, 1943. 1852 hours. War Department offices, Washington, D.C. The air inside the Pentagon is thick with heat and paper. Ceiling fans push warm air across desks stacked with production reports, sortie tables, and loss summaries. Phones ring constantly. Typewriters clatter without pause. Outside, the war feels distant. Inside, it's being measured in columns and margins. Colonel Robert Hastings, Army Air Forces Logistics, leans over a long conference table covered in charts. Red pencil marks track bomber losses over Europe. Blue lines trace replacement rates from factories across the United States. One blue line stands apart. Willow Run. Hastings taps it with his pencil. This curve doesn't behave like the others, he says. Across from him, a civilian analyst adjusts his glasses. It doesn't dip, the analyst replies. It doesn't spike. It just continues. Another officer flips through a binder. Losses from Schweinfurt should have forced a pause, he says. They didn't. Hastings nods. Because we didn't feel them. That's the realization settling over the room. The war in the air, so violent, so costly, has become disconnected from panic back home. Losses are absorbed, schedules adjusted, operations resumed without drama. Not because commanders are callous, because the system is resilient. A secretary enters quietly, placing fresh reports on the table. Hastings scans the top page. Projected output, 90 days forward. The numbers are aggressive and still conservative. He exhales slowly. We can plan offensives around this, he says. Not hope for them. Plan them. The room goes quiet. For the first time since the war began, American strategy is no longer constrained by scarcity. It's constrained only by imagination. Another officer speaks up. Germany can't match this, he says. Even if they stop bombing losses entirely, they can't catch up. Hastings closes the folder. That's the point, he says. They don't need to lose faster. They just need to lose slower. Because America is gaining faster than anyone can react. In Michigan, the line keeps moving. August 6, 1943. 2011 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Evening shift is underway. Ruth Thompson returns to her station, shoulders aching, hands steady. She doesn't know what happened in Washington today. She doesn't need to. Her world is measured in rivets. Tat, tat, tat. Pause. Shift. Frank Delgado finishes his row and steps back. How many today, he asks. Watkins checks the board. 23, he says. Maybe 24 if we don't slip. Frank whistles softly. That's nuts. Watkins shrugs. It's Tuesday. The line inches forward. Overhead, lights hum. Tools sing. Another bomber takes shape. Somewhere between Washington's charts and this factory floor, the war has changed form. It's no longer a question of if America can sustain the fight. It's a question of how long the enemy can endure knowing they cannot. The factory answers without words. By continuing. August 7th, 1943. 3:38 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Night shift moves differently. The noise is lower, not quieter, just smoother. Fewer voices. Fewer mistakes. The line glides forward like it knows the way in the dark. At Station 29, Ruth Thompson pauses for half a second longer than usual. Her wrist aches. She flexes it once, then reaches for the rivet gun again. Nobody notices. Nobody needs to. The line absorbs human limits the same way it absorbs losses overseas. By design, on a mezzanine above the floor, Lieutenant James O'Donnell stands with two visiting engineers from right field. They aren't here to admire the scale anymore. That phase passed days ago. They're here to confirm something. One of the engineers, Dr. Harold Franks, gestures toward the line. This, he says quietly, is the most powerful weapon in the war. O'Donnell nods. It doesn't fire, he replies. Frank smiles thinly. That's why it works. Down below, another Liberator reaches final inspection. Its serial number is chalked onto the nose, then wiped clean as the plane rolls forward. Numbers matter here. Names don't. Across the Atlantic, German planners still believe in decisive blows. One massive raid, one perfect counterattack, one disruption that changes everything. This place makes that idea obsolete. A foreman calls out. Shift change in 10. Night workers begin drifting toward exits. Day workers filter in, already tying aprons, already picking up tools. The line does not pause, not even for a breath. O'Donnell checks his watch. 3 hours since midnight. For bombers completed. On pace. At a desk near the wall, a clerk logs the figures in neat handwriting. They'll be transmitted to Washington before sunrise. No qualifiers. No excuses. Just output. Dr. Franks watches a wing being mated to a fuselage and shakes his head. In Germany, he says, they're still trying to protect factories from bombs. O'Donnell watches the line reroute around a minor slowdown without anyone raising their voice. They're protecting the wrong thing, he replies. You can rebuild walls. You can replace machines. But you can't bomb away flow. At 4:12, a motor fails on a conveyor section. The belt stutters. For 3 seconds, the line threatens to stall. Then a bypass kicks in. The fuselage moves on. Maintenance crews swarm the failed motor, already unbolting it. A replacement unit rolls in on a cart. Total disruption, 90 seconds. Watkins marks it on a clipboard. Impact, negligible. That word means more here than victory speeches ever could. Ruth finishes her final task of the shift and steps aside. Another worker slides in immediately. She stretches her shoulders and looks back once, just once, at the aircraft she helped build. She doesn't smile. She doesn't salute. She just nods. Because this isn't about pride. It's about inevitability. The bomber rolls forward. Another takes its place. The factory doesn't cheer. It doesn't boast. It simply keeps manufacturing the future, quietly, relentlessly, while the rest of the world is still fighting the present. September 12th, 1943. 14:18 hours. Somewhere over southern Germany. The sky is a hard, merciless blue. At 25,000 feet, the cold bites through oxygen masks and flight suits as a formation of B-24 Liberators drones eastward in tight boxes. Engines roar in steady unison, propellers blurring into silver discs. Vapor trails lace the sky like scars. Inside one bomber, Staff Sergeant William Harris, waist gunner, braces himself as black flak bursts around the formation. Flak! 2 o'clock high! Someone shouts over the intercom. The aircraft shudders. A jagged hole tears through the wing of the bomber ahead, metal peeling back like paper. The stricken plane drops out of formation, smoke trailing behind it. Harris watches it fall. He's seen this before. Too many times. German fighters slash through the formation moments later, cannons flashing. Another Liberator erupts in flame, spiraling toward the clouds below. Losses are heavy today. Back at the briefing tent before takeoff, no one pretended otherwise. But the mission goes on, because it always does now. September 12th, 1943. 1942 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The factory floor doesn't know about flak. It doesn't hear the screams of tearing metal or the panic of bailouts. It knows schedules. It knows tolerances. It knows movement. At Station 41, Frank Delgado sets his rivets with the same rhythm as yesterday. Tat, tat, tat. Pause. Shift. A supervisor updates the board. Losses reported, 38. Replacements scheduled, 41. No one reacts. Not because they don't care, but because the numbers already include the answer. Ruth Thompson tightens a fastener and glances briefly at the board. She exhales once, then turns back to her work. That's rough, someone mutters. Yeah, Frank replies. Keep it moving. That's the entire conversation. Up on the catwalk, Lieutenant James O'Donnell watches the board change again. Replacements scheduled, 43. The factory is already ahead. Across the ocean, German pilots are fighting with skill, courage, and desperation. Their guns are accurate. Their flag deadly. And still, the sky fills with bombers again the next morning. Not because losses didn't hurt, but because they didn't matter the way they used to. Inside Willow Run, the line absorbs today's losses the same way it absorbed yesterday's. A slight increase in tempo, a minor adjustment in logistics. A logistics runner hands Watkins a note. Washington wants confirmation we can sustain this rate. Watkins doesn't look up. Tell him yes. No qualifiers. No caveats. Outside, evening light fades across Michigan farmland. Inside, lights hum to full brightness automatically. Another Liberator reaches final inspection. Approved. It rolls forward. O'Donnell grips the railing and finally understands the brutal symmetry of it all. The enemy fights battles. This place fights time. And time is on America's side. The shooting in the sky can be as fierce as it wants. It can't catch up. October 6, 1943. 8:09 hours. Willow Run Bomber Plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Autumn light spills through the high windows, pale and cool, cutting through the haze of dust and exhaust that never quite leaves the air. Outside, leaves gather along fences and rail lines. Inside, the season doesn't matter. Time does. A large wall clock ticks steadily above the production board. Every worker knows its face without looking. It doesn't count hours. It counts opportunity. At Station 33, Ruth Thompson adjusts her gloves and leans into her task. The metal is cooler now, easier on the hands. She works faster, not rushed, just practiced. Tat, tat, tat. Pause. Shift. Above her, the board reads. Target interval, 63 minutes. Last completion, 62. Watkins allows himself half a nod. That's how you do it, he mutters. Lieutenant James O'Donnell stands beside a civilian consultant from the War Production Board, a man whose job is to translate factory rhythm into strategy. Europe wants more pressure, the consultant says. Longer campaigns. No pauses. O'Donnell watches a fuselage slide into place. They can have it, he replies. The consultant studies the line. You realize this changes how wars are planned, he says. No seasonal lulls. No recovery windows. O'Donnell doesn't answer right away, because that's exactly what makes this unsettling. This place doesn't surge for offensives. It doesn't slow for winter. It doesn't pause for losses. It just keeps time. Down on the floor, a minor shortage hits Station 19. Bolts delayed by a shipment stuck on a siding. For a moment, the flow tightens. Then a supervisor reroutes parts from a buffer rack. Another station advances, slightly ahead of schedule. The delay dissolves. Total impact, 12 minutes. Watkins marks it. Recovered. Across the Atlantic, 12 minutes can decide a battle. Here, it barely registers. A finished Liberator rolls past, nose gleaming under fresh paint. A chalk mark on the cowling reads 10:02. Time of completion. The next one already has a time assigned. Outside, engines cough to life as test pilots warm them up. The sound bleeds faintly through the walls, but inside, nobody looks up. Frank Delgado wipes his hands and steps aside for the next man. How long you think this goes on? Someone asks. Frank shrugs. As long as it needs to. That's the truth of it. This isn't a factory racing toward an endpoint. It's a system designed to run until the problem disappears. O'Donnell watches workers rotate seamlessly as the morning shift hands off to midday crews. The line doesn't even notice the change. He thinks about enemy planners, desperately searching for patterns, expecting fatigue, collapse, bottlenecks. They won't find any, because fatigue has been engineered out. Collapse has been designed against. Bottlenecks are hunted and eliminated like defects. The war outside is violent, emotional, unpredictable. This war, inside Willow Run, is cold. Mathematical. By 8:58, another bomber clears final inspection. Watkins checks the clock. Under, he says. Under target. The whistle blows, not loud, not triumphant. Just a marker in time. Another minute claimed. Another aircraft born. Somewhere far away, enemies are still trying to win by breaking things. Here, victory is being built by never stopping. December 22nd, 1943. 21:36 hours. Army Air Forces Headquarters, London. Rain streaks down the blackout curtains of the briefing room, muffling the distant sound of traffic and air raid sirens. Cigarette smoke hangs low over the long table where bomber group commanders sit hunched over maps of Europe. Red grease pencil marks crisscross Germany. Losses are marked too, but they no longer dominate the conversation. Brigadier General Frederick Anderson, 8th Air Force Operations, taps a folder with his knuckle. We'll fly again tomorrow, he says. No one flinches. A year ago, such losses would have forced a pause. Crews would have been grounded. Targets reconsidered. Now it's routine. A young intelligence officer clears his throat. Sir, losses today were higher than forecast. Anderson nods. Yes, he says. And replacements? The officer checks his notes. Already en route from the States. That's the moment. The room goes quiet. not from fear, but from realization. For the first time, German resistance is no longer shaping American plans. It's being factored in, absorbed like weather. Anderson straightens. We're not waiting for perfect conditions anymore, he says. We're setting them. Across the ocean, Willow Run answers without knowing it. December 23rd, 1943. For 18 hours. Willow Run bomber plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Snow presses against the windows, swirling under floodlights that turn flakes into streaks of white. Outside, winter clamps down hard. Inside, nothing changes. Workers move in heavy coats over coveralls, breath fogging briefly before disappearing into warm air. The line advances as it always has, steady, measured, indifferent to the season. Ruth Thompson tightens a fitting and glances at the snow piling up beyond the glass. Looks rough out there, someone says. Good thing we're in here, she replies, half smiling. Frank Delgado stamps his feet once and leans back into position. They can freeze all they want, he mutters. We're still clocking in. At the board, Watkins updates the day's target. Winter rate, unchanged. That line says everything. In Germany, winter slows repairs. Power shortages bite. Transport breaks down. Here, winter is just another variable, accounted for, neutralized. Lieutenant James O'Donnell watches from the catwalk, hands tucked into his coat pockets. He's been here long enough now that the noise feels normal. What doesn't feel normal is the thought creeping in his mind. If this had existed in 1916 or 1939, wars wouldn't last this long. A Liberator rolls forward, its metal cold to the touch, but flawless in function. Another follows behind it, then another. Outside, snowdrifts deepen. Inside, the line eats time. O'Donnell realizes the truth no one says out loud. By the time Allied troops land in France, the outcome will already be sealed. Not by bravery alone, not by generals, but by nights like this, quiet, frozen, unstoppable, where one factory keeps proving the enemy cannot catch up. The shooting hasn't stopped yet, but the war? The war has already been decided. May 7th, 1945, 6:42 hours. Willow Run bomber plant, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The announcement comes quietly. A radio near the supervisor's desk crackles, then steadies. A voice reads the bulletin in a measured tone. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over. For a moment, nobody reacts. Rivet guns still chatter. Conveyors still hum. A fuselage section inches forward under the same lights that have burned day and night for years. Watkins looks up slowly. Hold up, he says. The line pauses. Not because it can't go on, but because someone finally tells it to stop. Workers lift their heads. Tools lower. A few people remove their gloves, unsure what comes next. Some smile. Some just stand there, blinking. Ruth Thompson wipes her hands on a rag and exhales. So that's it, she says softly. Frank Delgado nods once. Guess so. There are no cheers at first. No flags. No shouting. The war didn't end here with a bang. It ends with a breath being released after years of holding it. Lieutenant James O'Donnell stands on the catwalk, looking down at the line that defined his war. He thinks of bombers lifting into gray skies, of lost reports absorbed without pause, of clocks that never stopped ticking. This place didn't celebrate victories. It prevented defeats. A plant manager steps forward. Take the day, he says. We earned it. That's when a noise breaks out. Laughter, clapping, a few tears wiped away quickly. Someone hugs a co-worker they've stood beside for 2 years without ever learning their full name. Outside, sunlight spills across the massive roofline. Inside, the line rests for the first time. Across the Atlantic, cities lie in ruins. Armies are shattered. Millions are dead. And yet, this factory still stands. This system still works. Because it was never built just to fight a war. It was built to outlast one. O'Donnell descends the stairs slowly, running a hand along the cold metal of a finished Liberator. This aircraft won't fly to Germany. It won't face flak or fighters. It won't need to, but thousands like it already did. They filled the skies faster than the enemy could empty them. They made losses meaningless. They turned courage into inevitability. Outside, workers drift into the morning air, blinking in the sun like people waking from a long dream. Somewhere, church bells ring. Somewhere else, horns honk in celebration. Willow Run doesn't make a sound. It doesn't need to, because the war was won here long before the shooting stopped. One not with gunfire or speeches, but with schedules, discipline, and a line that never slept. One factory, one relentless rhythm, one quiet victory,